2 Minute Drill Podcast. Jim Monahan along with Chris Swendeman on a Monday. And Chris, lots going on. Let's get right to the biggest story. You woke up this morning to find that Vladimir Guerrero Jr. had signed a long-term extension with the Toronto Blue Jays, something in the area, I should say, of 14 years and $500 million. And other than Vladdy Jr.'s family, you know who the happiest person on the planet is today?
Pete Alonso.
Pete Alonso, because Alonso can opt out of his Mets contract after this year. And boy, did Vladimir Guerrero signing with a team help Pete Alonso and any other first baseman who's out there.
Well, David Stearns and Brian Cashman, the GM for the Mets and Yankees, respectively, they had to go back to the drawing board and wipe that top name off both of their list because both of them were going to go hard after Vladdy after the end of the season. And now that it's back to the drawing board for both of them, they're going to have to find a plan B, which looks like maybe Kyle Tucker will be the best free agent at the end of this year now. But we're sitting here in 2025, and when you see somebody sign for 14 years and 500 million, you go, "Wow, that's a bargain," compared to Juan Soto. And these deals that are 700 million and up, you see 500 million, you go, "Wow, they got a pretty good deal out of that." What world are we living in, Jim?
There's a couple of cool things with this. One is Vladdy Jr. had said, I want to stay with the Blue Jays. And that's exactly what he's doing. He would have hit free agency at the end of this season. And I'm thinking to myself, there is no way that Toronto signs him. The
Right.
Blue Jays knew they had to. They had missed out on Ohtani. They had missed out on Soto. And now here's a homegrown player. He's been in the organization since what? He was 16.
Yep.
Not only did they have to sign him, they went out and they got the job done, which sends an incredible message to their fan base, as
Hmm.
well as some of the younger players coming up through the
Yes.
system.
Absolutely. I mean, Bo Bichette, who's another, second generation ball player that's on Toronto, he's a free agent after this year. Now, if you're him, will you take a better deal to stay because they're trying to keep the core together? If I'm Bo Bichette, I would want to stay now that Vladdy's in tow and they locked him up. I would absolutely want to stay there now. And Toronto isn't exactly um, a high destination for a lot of ball players. But now with Vladdy, and maybe if you keep Bo, things could change around for the franchise very quickly.
I think back so many times to the Cleveland
Hmm.
Indians in
Yep.
in the 90s when they had that good young core of players like Manny Ramirez, and they signed them to some, well, not super long-term deals, but they
Right.
signed them to a few years and gave them a lot of money
Hmm.
at the time, and it was a way of saying to these players, the fans and the organization, the other players coming up, we're going to take care of you.
It goes a long way with the players, probably more than most people would think. If they can keep the core of the guys together that they came up through the ranks with, I think that is a huge deciding factor. Unless somebody's throwing you $765 million, then things change. But for the most part, I think guys would like to keep their core together as long as they can.
So, I was thinking we had talked, I think it was last week, about the Red Sox and Christian Campbell, and I thought that they were rushing him to the major leagues way too soon. And I'm looking at how well he's done so far. And the Red Sox went out and they signed him to an 8-year deal. They signed Garrett Crochet to an extension. And if you're a young player coming up in the Red Sox system, like Marcelo Mayer or Roman Anthony, you're thinking, boy, if I do well, they're going to take care of me. And that's, I think, exactly what the Blue Jays did here.
And the Padres too, because the Padres did the same thing with the young outfielder Jackson Merrill. They locked him up last week. So these teams are going about it, I think, the right way. Instead of waiting until that final year when the pressure's on to get a deal done, and when they're sniffing free agency only a little down the road, now they're locking them up long term and showing we're investing in you. We know you have the goods. Now you're going to be a part of this franchise for a long time. And I think it's a smart move on whatever organization's doing it. It's a very good move.
And then you look at an organization like the Pittsburgh Pirates. And if you are
Like,
Paul Skeens and you're watching what's happening, Are you even remotely thinking about signing any kind of a long-term extension if the Pirates organization were to come to you with one?
It was funny, Jim, because over the weekend there was somebody at the Pirates game with a Yankee jersey on, and on the back it had Skeens and his number. And I thought that was it was so, I mean, that was just very, very brilliant on the fans' part. I thought it was hysterical. But you know what? It's the sad reality. He will be, if not the Yankees, the Mets or the Red Sox or anybody that'll go out and spend the money. He will be there because look at all the pitchers that have come through the Pirates organization. Hello, Garrett Cole, among many others. And they've, Jim, give you a little hit. You know when the last time the Pirates spent money on a free agent other than their own?
Was it even in this century?
Now, 2016, when they signed Ivan Nova, the pitcher, to a 3-year, $29 million deal. We're talking 9 years ago, Jim. I mean, come on. At some point, when does MLB have to look at that and go, guys, what are you doing?
Well, this brings up some other stuff. And just to stay with the Pirates for a second, I mean, how clueless does your organization have to be to take down a logo, a sign on the right field wall honoring perhaps your greatest player ever, Roberto Clemente,
The
to put
most
up an
beloved.
advertisement? They
Oh,
put an
what?
ad up and like, oh, my bad, according to the team president. Yeah, it was your bad. Even if he's, taking the hit for somebody else. Like, what are you thinking as an organization to do this?
The problem is they weren't thinking because if they were, it would have never have happened. You're only apologetic because you got caught. I mean, let's call a spade a spade. And I mean, that's your most beloved, treasured player of all time. And you do something so, so stupid like that. It's just terrible, absolutely terrible. But it's indicative of the franchise.
And to stay with the Pirates for a second and to circle back to Vladimir Guerrero Jr. with this huge amount of money that's being offered to Vladdy, fans of teams like the Pirates are saying, well, we can't compete with this. There's got to be a salary cap. We just can't do this. And I would argue that all of these teams have the money to pay some big guy. Now, could they go out and afford somebody like Vladimir Guerrero Jr.? I don't know. But they've got enough money that they could sign a big name free agent. What they don't have is the money to cover up a mistake. See what the Mets did with Verlander and Scherzer and how that didn't work
Right.
out. Did it stop Steve Cohen from
No,
spending money on Soto?
nope,
Not
not
even
at
a
all.
little bit. The Yankees, listen, has the Stanton contract paid off?
Not
No,
quite.
no.
No, no.
Has the Garrett Cole contract paid off?
That I would say yes.
Sort of. They didn't win one yet.
I mean, he's pitching well for them. It's that he wasn't the problem. So I would
Well,
say,
except for the fact
as
that he
far as
doesn't know how
his,
to cover first base. But I
well,
digress.
exactly. But beside that, I think it's been, he was the best pitcher on the market, and I think he's done well for them overall. Let's put it that way.
I know that the owners are going to come fast and hard with the next negotiation in 2026 for a salary cap. The game is healthy. The money is there for the sport. You've got to deal with some ridiculous owners. And again, I'll throw the Pirates out there. They have the money, what they choose to do with it. And maybe they can't cover big mistakes, but what they choose to do with it, why not go after a Skeens and say, listen, you are the face of our franchise, young man. We believe in you, and here's proof of it. Why not?
You know what? I'd be okay with I'd be okay with the salary cap if you also instituted something like the NFL has, where you have a salary cap floor as well. And you know what? Penalize these teams, again, like the Pirates, who don't spend their money and just keep the revenue coming in, to their pockets. You have to have, if you want to have a cap, then have a floor and make these teams spend the money and be competitive. Because if not, you're just going to have the owners hoarding the money in their back pockets.
So we're going to keep an eye on this whole Vladdy Jr. thing, as well as Alonso, who's had some big hits so far this year. We'll see how that plays out over the season. One of the other things that happened, we were talking about these new torpedo bats, which actually aren't all that new. Giancarlo Stanton used one last year in the postseason, but they are out there on the open market. You can get them from Academa, Louisville Slugger has them, a number of different companies.
Yeah, I mean, and we said after week one, everybody take a breath. It's something new. Well, not really that new, but it's a new concept. And you know what? Everybody can do it. The Yankees weren't hoarding torpedo bats. Other players can use them. So have your team go out and buy a bunch, or go out and buy a bunch, because every team has the opportunity to do so. So, crying about it or complaining about it makes no sense. Pitchers adjust. It's what they do. Baseball is a game of adjustments. Pitchers will adjust to the bats. It's just the way baseball goes.
And if it really was the bat, don't you think Aaron Judge would be using one?
Exactly. I mean, the one of the best hitters in the game. You don't think if that could give him even more of an advantage? Like, he really needs one, but he would be using it too.
So we had for the first time, I think since what, 2008, four number one seeds make it to the NCAA Final Four, the championship game tonight. What's your take on what happened with Duke?
You look at it and I was watching the game, and at one point it was the early in the second half. I looked at the TV and went, "This one's over. It's Duke. Pack it in. They're going to the finals versus Florida." Well, a couple minutes later, not so much. I mean, in the last 10 minutes, they scored one field goal, Jim. One. And I mean, it does make you scratch your head and raise an eyebrow. I don't want to point fingers, and you never want to look, you never want to blame anybody, but it was very cringeworthy, put it that way, the way it ended.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. You thinking that Duke is on its way to a championship game, and it obviously doesn't happen. Cooper Flagg was probably going to be taken in the very early goings of the 2025 NBA draft, a first round pick as just a freshman. What a way to end your freshman year.
Yeah, if I'm Cooper Flagg, I'm really thinking about going back for another year and seeing if he can go on a redemption tour, because I think that's the way everybody's going to remember him now. And I don't think that's the way you want to go into the NBA draft. This kid, if he went even to the final game against Florida, didn't even have to win it, he was going to probably be the number one overall pick. Now, you might have teams going, well, maybe he's not ready. So, and the farther you fall in the first round, Jim, the money goes down too. So
Hmm.
it may be worth it to go back for one more year.
And he is just 18 years old. We should point out
Right.
his birthday, I believe, is in the middle of December. So he doesn't turn 19
Yeah.
until near the end of this year. So I don't think we should write his career off just yet.
Just no. Well, I think we'll give him ample time to resurrect himself.
Before we close out, I want to turn things around a little bit and talk a little bit of music with you. I had a chance to read Mike Campbell's new book, Heartbreaker, a memoir. And if you are a fan of Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, it is a must read. Chris, the stories in this book are so good. Stories, I mean, Bob Dylan is in the book. There's a great story involving Mike Campbell's mom meeting Mick Jagger. Great behind the scenes stuff with Tom Petty, both as a solo artist with the Heartbreakers, with the band Mudcrutch. And it's not one of those books that dishes a lot of dirt. There's some details that he gives on different
Right.
things that go on, but the book is told with so much love and affection for everybody who was involved with the bands, the various bands that Mike was in. It is a phenomenal read. I highly recommend the book.
As a huge Tom Petty fan, I can't wait to read it. I'm really looking forward to it. In the age of American musicians, I always look at it, Dylan, Morrison, and Tom Petty kind of right under them. He was such a phenomenal talent with just such an amazing catalog of music. I mean, to read something like this is just going to be such an enjoyable, experience for
For
sure.
anybody who has not read the book yet, there are so many stories, and I don't want to give away any details, but we talked when you and I were both on the air at
Yep.
WDHA about Paul McCartney and that during that
Yep.
Beatles special that was on,
Right.
writing the song Get Back in the studio, pulling it
Yep.
out of thin air. And there are a couple of stories of Tom Petty doing pretty much the exact same thing during the recording of Full Moon Fever, which, by the way, when Petty handed the record in to MCA Records, they said, Tom, there's no hit single here. Like, what? What?
I'm sorry. Come again?
I beg your pardon?
I
So, I
beg
mean,
to differ,
yeah,
sir.
I beg to differ indeed. So again, if you're a fan of Tom Petty and Mike Campbell for that matter, who's written so many great songs, both with Tom and "Boys of Summer," one of the songs that he's co-written
Yep.
outside of the Heartbreakers, I highly, highly recommend the book. And that is the 2 Minute Drill podcast for another Monday. If you are watching this on YouTube, like, subscribe, and if you're on any other podcast platform, well, you can download and subscribe and do all those things you're supposed to do so that the
Exactly.
podcast gets more viewers and or listeners. No, podcasts get listeners, videos get
Exactly.
viewers. I'm very
Viewers. There you
confused.
go.
It was a long day at work.
It's
We'll
all
talk
right.
next week.
They get the idea. All right. I'll talk to you next week, Jim. Have a good one.